Picture a coin with a surface so clean, so untouched, so sharply defined that even under 50x magnification it appears almost handcrafted. No nicks, no bag marks, perfect luster, razor-sharp lettering, full detail in Lincoln's hair and coat. A strike achieved not through luck, but through a near miracle of timing and machine calibration. These coins graded at the highest elite levels represent the peak of numismatic quality. And when such a specimen surfaces today, the bidding wars begin. One such 1968 1 cent coin, flawless and nearly untouched since the day it left the press, stunned the marketplace. Estimates soared. Collectors with deep pockets, museum curators, and private wealth buyers entered the arena. The final hammer price, over $810,000, one copper 1 cent coin, value greater than many American homes, worth more than most workers earn in a decade. And here's the mystery that keeps collectors awake at night. How many more exist? Most Americans, even coin enthusiasts, have never seen a perfect or near-perfect 1968 Lincoln 1 cent. Many are hiding in pockets of private collections. Some were forgotten in safe deposit boxes. Others may still be tucked inside an old blue Whitman folder, sitting on a shelf in someone's childhood bedroom. Think about that. Thousands of American families unknowingly own coins from this exact year and mint. Yet only a tiny percentage will take the time to examine them with professional care. And this is where the true treasure hunters separate themselves, because in numismatics, wealth is not about luck. It's about attention, care, curiosity, and the willingness to look where others ignore. How does a 1968 Lincoln 1 cent reach values in the hundreds of thousands? It comes down to four forces converging at once. First, the mintage volume. Yes, the San Francisco Mint produced many tens of millions of coins, but competition for flawless examples is fierce. With so many entering daily circulation, the majority were damaged within hours. Scratches from vending machines, contact marks from coin bags, and dulling from simple pocket travel. Second, the difficulty of achieving perfection. The minting equipment of the 1960s, while respected, did not have today's laser-precise tolerances. A perfect strike wasn't common. When it happened, it was a statistical anomaly. Third, early preservation. To bring a coin into the 21st century with perfect surfaces, someone would have needed to pull it from circulation immediately before anyone touched it, dropped it, or let it slide against another coin. Only a few forward-thinking collectors did that. Fourth, the grading environment. Today's population reports from major grading services reveal how few 1968 coins exist at the highest levels. When rarity joins condition, prices explode. Because collectors aren't just buying metal. They're buying the unlikelihood of its survival. They're buying history, preserved against all odds, and some are buying prestige, the thrill of owning what others will never have. But there is something deeper happening right now, something psychological. Modern collectors, especially those between ages 30 and 65, are investing differently than before. Many are growing skeptical of digital financial systems. They want assets that exist physically, assets that can be held, displayed, passed from one generation to the next. Coins provide that not just as investments, but as legacies. When the parent passes down the 1968 Lincoln 1 cent in pristine condition, they're not just giving their heirs a valuable object, they're giving them a story, a slice of American industry, a symbol of perseverance and hard-earned prosperity. Collectors know this. That's why demand is rising. In the last decade, premium coin auctions have seen record traffic. High-grade, small denomination coins once overlooked are now exploding in popularity. Stories like the $810,000 result for a 1968 specimen ignite something powerful, if one exists. Another might, and that possibility drives discovery. Let's pause for a surprising fact. Did you know that in some professional auctions, 60% of the bidders never set foot in the room? Many are placing digital bids from laptops at kitchen tables, offices, even smartphones while riding the commuter train. The coin market is evolving into a digital battlefield where competition is global. That means prices for rare pieces are not just influenced by American collectors, but by buyers in Europe, Asia, and wealthy investment circles around the world. A generation ago, coin collecting was a hobby. Today, it is an asset class, one with its own analytics, trend tracking, market cycles, sentiment swings, and sudden surges. The 1968 Tesla Lincoln one sits squarely at the center of that surge. Let's go deeper into the world of grading because this is where fortunes turn. Most people imagine grading as a simple numeric scale, but in reality, excellence is determined under brutal scrutiny. A single tiny nick, a light scuff invisible to the naked eye, can drop a coin's grade from perfection into mediocrity, changing its value not by 10%, but by tens of thousands of dollars. The elite 1968 test specimens didn't just survive. They endured a grading gauntlet: fluorescent lighting, magnification, surface mapping, metal flow analysis. A coin that reaches the top proof like Deep Cameo, MS67, MS68, or beyond has essentially been declared a statistical rarity. That's why collectors treat high-grade 1968 Tesla Lincoln 1 cents like gemstones. They are the diamonds of the copper world, small, unassuming, yet shockingly valuable. What makes the 1968 test so emotionally compelling is not just its value, but its timing. This coin emerged from a moment of national anxiety and transformation. Americans were rethinking their future, questioning institutions, questioning currency stability. Copper coins were disappearing from jars, drawers, and jars because people believed the metal itself might one day be worth more than its face value. The 1968 1 cent became a witness to history. It saw the end of silver circulating coins, the transition into modern minting methods, and the rising wave of serious American coin collecting that continues to this day. Owning one in pristine condition is like holding a preserved page ripped from the American timeline. Now imagine this. Somewhere in the United States tonight sits an old mason jar of 1 cent coins sitting in the garage after someone's grandfather passed away. Inside, a San Francisco minted Lincoln coin from 1968 might be waiting, unrecognized, untouched for 50 years. Maybe even one struck from the same die as a record-shattering specimen. That possibility excites collectors. It fuels late-night eBay hunts, flea market wanderings, estate sales scouting trips, attic searches, and safe deposit box visits, because the joy of coin collecting isn't just ownership. It is the hunt, the discovery, the adrenaline of realizing that a small object in your hand may hold extraordinary value. So, how do serious collectors identify a potential treasure among 1968 Tesla Lincoln 1 cents? They look for glass smooth surfaces, mirror-like luster, strong die lines without weakness, crisp separation in Lincoln's beard details, a mint mark that appears perfectly struck, not faint, not distorted, uniform color and tone. They look for a coin that feels frozen in time. Collectors who find one know instantly, this is something different. But here's a pattern interrupt to keep in mind. Even if a coin looks perfect to the naked eye, grading professionals have rejected countless perfect submissions. Many collectors learn this lesson the hard way, sometimes after paying substantial submission fees. There is humility in coin collecting, a reminder that perfection is rarely granted freely. Let's bring the story back to its emotional core. Why does the idea of a 1968 test penny worth more than $800,000 resonate with so many Americans? Because it challenges the idea that wealth is always obvious. We live in a world where opportunity often hides in plain sight, where the smallest object small enough to slip between couch cushions can hold more value than modern digital stock portfolios. It reminds us that fortunes are often discovered not by experts in skyscrapers, but by everyday people willing to pay closer attention. Collectors don't just collect coins, they collect moments of possibility, and possibility is one of the most valuable resources. In the American spirit, there is also a deeper truth. Coins teach patience. A 1968 test Lincoln 1 cent didn't become valuable overnight. It required decades of survival, decades of being protected from scratches, humidity, fingerprints, and proper storage. Decades before the market recognized just how rare top-tier examples were. Collectors who understand this principle often apply it to life itself. Some things grow in value quietly. Some rewards rise slowly. Some of the greatest returns are earned not through speed, but through preservation, care, and foresight. Coins teach legacy. They remind us that what we protect today may enrich those who come after us. As we near the end of this journey, one final thought hangs in the air like the last note of a violin. If one perfect 1968 Lincoln 1 cent can command over $810,000, how many life-changing coins remain undiscovered? In dresser drawers, in inherited coin folders, in dusty rolls from forgotten banks, in the pocket change jar sitting beneath someone's staircase right now. Someone, someday, is going to make a discovery that turns an ordinary evening into a legend. Maybe that someone is watching this video. Maybe that someone is you. So the next time you hold an Abraham Lincoln 1 cent piece from the San Francisco Mint dated 1968, pause before you toss it aside. Turn it slowly under the light. Look with intention. Treat it as though it might carry a secret, because sometimes it does. And in the world of numismatics where history, rarity, and desire collide, that secret can change everything. The story begins in the early 1970s, a decade stamped by economic uncertainty. American families were dealing with inflation, rising food costs, and the nation still reeling from the weight of the Vietnam War. The U.S. Mint was producing billions of small denomination cents each year, most destined to vanish into pockets, drawers, car ashtrays, and candy store registers. The 1971 Philadelphia issue was no exception. More than $1 billion were struck, and nearly all were considered ordinary mass-produced background noise in an economy that took the 1 cent coin for granted. And yet, within this ocean of copper pieces lay something far from ordinary, because not every 1971 Philadelphia 1 cent coin was struck equally. Some carried minting anomalies. Some displayed doubled inscriptions, errors invisible to the untrained eye, but unmistakable when magnified. And among them were a tiny handful of examples exhibiting doubling so dramatic, so crisp, and so unmistakably mechanical that they became legendary. Collectors today refer to them as dramatic variety examples. Coins where liberty, in God we trust, and even the date 1971 appears shadowed, doubled, or echoed due to a misaligned die strike. Coins like these don't just attract collectors, they ignite competition. Imagine the moment a collector first sees it, perhaps while inspecting a handful of old wheat cents inherited from a family member, or while sorting through rolls purchased from a bank decades ago and forgotten in a storage box. The magnifier comes to the eye. The letters suddenly appear doubled, almost written twice. A heartbeat quickens. Because in that instant, one realizes this might not be just another Abraham Lincoln cent. This might be a ticket into numismatic immortality. Of course, rare coins can't rely on emotion alone. The market demands proof. It demands rarity, provenance, certification, and demands strong enough to turn a mysterious oddity into a market powerhouse. That is exactly what happened here over the past decades. Grading services such as the professional coin grading service and numismatic guarantee company have authenticated only a very small number of these high-grade, double-die pieces from 1971 Philadelphia. And in the world of American coinage, where supply and demand are locked in an arm wrestling match, scarcity like that changes everything. Let's take a moment to reflect on why such dramatic price leaps can happen with what looks like an everyday coin. Collectors, especially those in the 35 to 70 age demographic, often seek something deeper than metal. They are hunting legacy. They are investing in history. They want to own stories that no longer repeat themselves in modern currency. Manufacturing. And coins like the 1971 Philadelphia double-die issue fulfill all three desires. But here is where the psychological shift happens. Many modern collectors grew up with these coins. They remember walking into 5-and-dime stores with pockets full of them. They remember leaving them in change jars. They remember their weight, their color, their sound when dropped into the palm. Finding out that one of those same coins possibly still resting somewhere in the jar, inside a kitchen cabinet, could be worth the price of a luxury home. That is the emotional spark that drives a feeding frenzy in modern numismatics. This is not just economics. It's nostalgia weaponized by rarity. Halfway through the story, a fair question emerges. How does a coin that costs 1 cent become worth 6 figures? The answer is part technical, part historical, and part psychological. First, the technical. When a die is prepared, the letters, date, and details are impressed into steel. Sometimes, especially in earlier stages of mint preparation, the die was impressed more than once, resulting in double imaging. When that die is used to strike coins, every cent produced carries the same doubling. This wasn't intentional. It wasn't an artistic choice. It was a snapshot of imperfection at a time when minting was still susceptible to human variables. And that tiny flaw created value that no amount of government printing could destroy. Historically, the 1971 double dies sit in a fascinating era. The dramatic 1955 and 1969 as Lincoln die varieties had already proven that doubled inscriptions could become legends. Collectors, treasure hunters, and students of American minting began paying closer attention. So when pristine 1971 double-die cents finally hit the market years later, they already had a gallery of collectors ready to compete. And psychologically, scarcity triggers urgency. If you heard there were 50 examples available, you might wait. If you heard there were 15, you'd think twice. If someone whispers that perhaps fewer than 10 exist in elite gem condition, collectors don't hesitate. They act that it is worth noting the subtle but powerful truth about the modern coin market. Auction prices are not just financial, they are emotional signatures. Every record-breaking sale sends a message through the community. Someone believes this piece will continue to climb, and that confidence becomes contagious. It happened with gold double eagles, with early colonial coinage, with rare mercury dimes, and now with error examples like the 1971 Philadelphia double die. But let's not overlook the most intriguing twist. This is a coin you could still find. Unlike 19th century gold issues locked away in museums or deep private collections, the 1971 Lincoln cent lived a working life. It rolled inside cash registers. It traveled across lunch counters. It may still sit in a jar, a basement box, a forgotten coin album, or a charity donation bucket. Even today, when roll hunters and modern investors examine thousands of coins per month, one example can still surface unexpectedly. That is what fuels the modern treasure hunt. At this point, another question arises. How would one know if they were holding the right one? There are visual clues to clean doubling in the inscriptions, the distinctive mechanical appearance, the strong separation of the date numerals, but no serious collector should ever assume value. Without certification, grading matters. Authentication matters. Condition matters. A dramatic double dye in heavily circulated condition may still command a respectable price. But a superb gem example fully struck, blazing original surface. Minimal marks can ignite bidding wars that push six figures. Even higher in quiet private transactions where the invoices and handshakes are invisible to the public. This is also where investment thinking enters the picture, because savvy collectors understand something Wall Street occasionally forgets. Rare coins can outperform markets when the right combination of scarcity, demand, and story converged in the last decade. Top-tier numismatic material has seen remarkable growth, and coins like this piece is rooted in nostalgia, attainable by average Americans, yet extraordinarily rare in elite conditions, have begun to feel like the blue-chip assets of small denomination collecting. Some investors purchase them for personal satisfaction, some for wealth preservation, some because they see a trend forming. A growing number of Americans realizing that everyday objects from childhood now hold financial potential that rivals metals, stocks, or real estate. Now let's zoom out. Picture the person who finds one. Maybe they're an older collector going through an album after years away from the hobby. Maybe a widow sorting through her late husband's decades-long collection. Maybe a 45-year-old investor who bought $25 in wrap set rolls as a quiet experiment. One moment, it's just another coin. The next hit could be the most valuable physical object in their home. And that moment of discovery is priceless. As we approach the final stretch of this story, remember this: the magic of rare coins does not lie in metal content. It lies in the stories they carry. A cent is small, overlooked, often dismissed. Children lose them. Adults ignore them. Cashiers roll their eyes when one falls to the counter. But something extraordinary happens when a forgotten everyday object proves it never deserved to be. Underestimated, it becomes a metaphor for opportunity, a reminder that value can hide in plain sight. A silent encouragement that treasure is not always buried, it is often simply unnoticed. So what does the 1971 Philadelphia Abraham Lincoln 1 cent with dramatic doubling truly represent? It represents a crossroads in American minting technology. It represents scarcity created by human imperfection. It represents a market now willing to pay luxury-level premiums for coins once spent on bubble gum and baseball cards. And most importantly, it represents a powerful message to collectors and investors alike. Sometimes the extraordinary begins with something ordinary. Sometimes wealth is sitting in the palm of your hand before you even realize it. As you go about your week, here is a small challenge. If you have old jars of coins, open them. If you have albums on a bookshelf, pull them down. If you have an old inheritance no one has thoroughly examined, give it a second look, because you may be one of the few individuals still holding a piece. The market is hungry for a coin whose rarity is still being defined each time a new example is discovered or certified. And if lightning strikes, if you are the one who finds that dramatic double-dyed treasure, then the story you tell will no longer be about a coin worth 1 cent. It will be about a discovery worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. A life-changing footnote in the history of American minting. And a legacy few collectors ever experience firsthand, because the next great numismatic treasure is not always in the Smithsonian. Sometimes it is still sitting quietly in a small glass jar in someone's home waiting to be found. Within that massive production run, some examples emerged that were struck cleaner, sharper, and with greater precision than the rest. Some were preserved in extraordinary condition, untouched, uncirculated, crisp in detail, handled with gloved hands, or sealed away by accident. And because of the exact state of the market today, one exceptionally preserved example has already been valued in the hundreds of thousands, with collectors estimating possible auction outcomes crossing the $1 million threshold. Now pause and consider that. A coin most people would hand to a cashier without a second thought is now commanding the price of a high-end luxury home. Why does this happen? Because coin collecting, especially in America, is not just about metal. It's about meaning. It's about the hunt. And it's about market forces that reward rarity, condition, and desirability in ways the average consumer never sees. As we continue, keep one phrase in mind. Value is always where the majority isn't looking. That is the heart of the 1975 Lincoln Cent story. Let's peel back the layers. First, the composition. These coins were made of 95% copper, 5% zinc, a blend that disappeared after 1980 when the United States Mint switched to far cheaper, copper-coated zinc plankets. Already, this detail generates nostalgia. People remember the weight, the sound of real metal, the way these older cents feel compared to the later modern versions. Investors are increasingly aware that older copper cents carry intrinsic metal value. On top of numismatic potential. Next, the mintage. The Denver Mint produced more than 4.5 billion of these coins. On paper, that sounds anything but rare. And this is where casual observers get misled. They believe large production equals no value, and then they walk away. But serious numismatists know better, because out of billions, only a microscopic fraction survived in flawless condition. Think about it. Most of these coins left the mint in bags, got tossed into registers, slid across counters, scraped against keys and pocket change, and circulated until they wore down. Only a tiny number were pulled early, preserved perfectly, and protected from environmental damage. Those perfect survivors became the blue-chip stocks of the coin world. Here is where market psychology steps in. When a coin's population at ultra-high grading levels is small, especially when that coin is tied to a historic era, collectors begin to compete aggressively. Ego comes into play. Prestige comes into play. Wealth preservation comes into play. A top-tier graded Abraham Lincoln cent from Denver in 1975 is not just a coin. It is bragging rights. It is investment potential. It is a legacy piece, something that could be passed through generations and still retain, or even multiply. It's valued that now. Let's build the suspense further, because the story gets even more compelling. Every collector has heard of the $1 million rarities, the 1913 Liberty nickel, the 1804 silver dollar, the 1943 Lincoln struck on a bronze placket. But what makes the 1975 so emotionally gripping is that it hides in plain sight. Anyone watching this video could have one already and not know it. It could be sitting in a showbox, a cigar tin, a childhood collection that hasn't been opened since the Reagan administration. Think about how many families have spare change from decades ago shoved into drawers. How many grandparents toss old coins into jars thinking, maybe someday these will be worth something. Most never checked again. Most never will. But a select few, those willing to look deeper, could unlock astonishing wealth. That possibility is what keeps this hobby alive. The thrill of what if. Let's shift gears for a moment with a surprising detail about human behavior. Studies show that collectors do not pursue coins solely for profit. Many are driven by emotion, nostalgia, and the desire to preserve history. And here's the fascinating twist. When emotional passion meets limited supply, prices rise faster than even traditional financial markets expect. In recent auctions, coins once considered too common to ever be valuable suddenly exploded in price, after just a handful of high-end collectors began competing. And once a record sale is set, every other well-preserved example climbs indefinitely. It becomes a chain reaction. A new market floor is established. That is exactly what has happened with the 1975 Denver Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin. Which brings us to another essential truth. The biggest profits in numismatics are rarely made by those who follow the crowd. They are made by those who study patterns, anticipate interest before it peaks, and collect intelligently. The 1975D is appealing for major reasons. First, the copper era is becoming increasingly historic. As time moves on, younger generations are showing renewed interest in the era of real metal cents. Not just because of intrinsic value, but because these coins feel authentic in a way modern strikes do not. Second, high-grade survivors are astonishingly scarce despite the original mintage. Population reports show that only a handful qualify at the top levels of professional grading scales. Third, market liquidity has grown dramatically thanks to online auctions and global bidding platforms. You no longer need to attend a convention in person to compete. High net worth collectors from Singapore, Dubai, London, or Dallas can all bid in real time, pushing prices higher. And fourth, every time a major sale occurs, the value of all comparable coins rises behind it. Let's create a small cliffhanger. The highest theoretical value of this coin may not have been achieved yet. Prices could continue to rise as more collectors awaken to this specific date and mint combination. So now the big question, what should a collector or investor look for? While this script is not giving financial advice, it is revealing the traits that auction records consistently reward. These include perfect, uncirculated condition, no contact marks, no spotting, no trace of wear, sharp strike with fully visible details, especially in Lincoln's hair and the lettering, rich, original copper luster that has not been cleaned or altered, strong surfaces free of toning damage, or environmental exposure if someone finds a 1975D that meets these criteria. Professional grading could transform a 1-cent coin into something worth tens of thousands, or potentially far more. And here is another revelation. Many collectors overlook errors in varieties. A shift in die alignment, a doubled element, a struck-through detail, a mint anomaly. These can push values exponentially higher. Imagine the emotional experience of submitting a coin you have owned for decades, waiting nervously for the grading result, then seeing a label that places your piece among the finest known. That moment is unforgettable. Collectors talk about it the way adventurers talk about reaching the summit of a mountain. That feeling is not just profit, it is triumph, validation, legacy. Speaking of legacy, this is where the story deepens. Numismatics is one of the few hobbies that bridges generations. A parent hands down a coin collection. A grandparent gives a jar of old copper cents to a grandchild. A forgotten showbox from the 1970s ends up in the hands of someone who discovers that one piece inside is worth a college education or the down payment on the house. Coins carry stories. They capture our national memory. And the Abraham Lincoln 1-cent copper coin from the Denver Mint in 1975 represents a time in America that is now gone. A nation recovering from turmoil, shifting into a new era, and still striking coins that were meant to last a lifetime. That is why this specific coin triggers such a deep emotional response when collectors talk about it. It's not just a rarity, it's what it represents. Let's insert another attention reset moment. How many Americans alive today have handled a small fortune without realizing it? It's a humbling thought, because when you study numismatics long enough, a powerful truth emerges. Real treasure is not always hidden under the ocean or locked in a museum vault. Sometimes it jingles in pockets. Sometimes it sits inside a coffee can on the top shelf of a garage. Before we conclude, consider this final insight. The greatest numismatic fortunes are often made quietly, not by chasing the obvious million-dollar coins everyone knows about, but by recognizing the potential of overlooked dates before the rest of the population wakes up. The 1975D Lincoln cent is a perfect example. For decades it was ignored, until suddenly it wasn't. The market shifted, interest surged, prices climbed, and now, even collectors who never believed common dates could achieve extraordinary valuations are realizing. That they can. So if you have old copper cents stored away, inspect them. Look closely. Treat every coin as if it might be the one. Because the most valuable habit in this hobby is simple. Never assume anything has no value. As the camera fades out and the story settles in your mind, imagine the thrill of discovering that you own a piece of history so rare and so pristine that it changes your financial future forever. That is the promise behind treasures like the Abraham Lincoln 1 cent piece from Denver struck in 1975. Not everyone will be valuable, but one is all it takes. And that is why collectors keep searching, why hope stays alive, and why the next great American coin discovery might not be in a museum or a vault. It might be in your own hands right now. In the world of American coinage, every once in a while a story surfaces that forces collectors, investors, and market observers to sit up and ask a simple question. How did something so ordinary become worth a fortune? Tonight, we explore one such mystery centered around a small, reddish-brown metal disc that millions of Americans handled without a second thought. The 1991 Denver Mint Abraham Lincoln 1 cent coin, a coin that, in rare cases, has sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in private transactions is rumored to have crossed the $1 million threshold. Before you shake your head and think, a common circulating 1 cent coin could never be worth that, pause for a moment, because this is not a story about pocket change. This is a story about rarity, human psychology, forgotten minting quirks, and value hiding in plain sight. Imagine this. You're digging through an inherited coin jar, your grandfather's desk drawer, the kind made of heavy oak and filled with objects he never threw away. Old keys, a watch that stopped ticking 10 years before he did, and hundreds of 1 cent coins he said he'd get around to sorting. You don't expect anything special. And then, hidden among them, something subtle, a tiny D-mint mark, a shimmer of high-quality blanket metal, sharp detail on President Lincoln's bow tie, and jacket fold so sharp it seems carved, rather than stamped. A 1991 date. Could this be one of the coins that changed hands in daily commerce yet now commands jaw-dropping? Bidding wars. Collectors have a term for this experience, the heartbeat moment. The second a coin stops being just a coin and becomes a possibility, a doorway into wealth, history, and legacy. Let's step backward, just for a moment, to understand why. The Denver Mint was running at exceptional production speed. America was in a different chapter. Interest rates were changing. The silver and gold markets were fluctuating sharply, and billions of 1 cent coins were struck without much fanfare. These humble pieces of copper-coated zinc were meant to vanish into pockets, cash registers, and dusty mason jars, but the machines were not perfect. Pressmen knew that early in each D's life, when the steel die faces were freshly polished and perfectly sharp. Coins with extraordinary detail emerged. The cheekbone of Abraham Lincoln appeared crisply defined. The folds of the coat looked sculptural. The lettering stood tall and clean. By mid-life, dies flattened. By end life, they simply struggled. And in those early strikes, a handful of coins left the Denver Mint so immaculate and so visually breathtaking that decades later, third-party professional grading services would deem them the highest possible categories, MS69 or even MS70. That is the difference between a coin worth 1 cent and one worth a house, sometimes several houses. People new to the hobby ask, why do collectors pay fortunes for something that technically isn't rare in mintage? Seasoned collectors smile, because true rarity isn't how many were made. It's how many exist today in pristine condition. Coins circulate. They scrape against keys, gum wrappers, pocket lint, school desks, and gas station counters. They fall into parking lot gutters and rattle in metal toll buckets. By the time most 1991 Denver Mint Abraham Lincoln 1-cent pieces reached the public, they were already scratched, rim-denting, and dull. But the handful that stayed untouched, bank rolls never opened, mint sets never handled. Collections stored carefully in controlled environments, these survivors became the elite. And elite coins caused sparks in the numismatic marketplace. Backroom bidding wars, private sales with non-disclosure agreements, phone calls between wealthy collectors at the high end of the spectrum. Investors who don't buy coins for show, they buy them for power, as a hedge against market volatility, and as a legacy to pass down generations. And here's where the story becomes even more surprising. In 2021, 2022, and again more recently, certified examples in the highest mint state categories entered auction houses and stunned observers. Some crossed $10,000, then $50,000, then one, placed in front of to determined bidders who simply refused to blink, soared to an astonishing valuation reportedly near the $800,000 mark. Dealers whispered that a private exchange may have exceeded $1 million, not confirmed publicly, of course, but in the world of elite collecting, many of the biggest deals never see a screen, a catalog, or a headline. The natural reaction is disbelief. A 1-cent coin? Seriously? But ask yourself, is it really different from the art world? One brush stroke, one signature, one unexpected detail on the canvas can shift a painting from attic storage to global sensation. Coins are miniature artworks struck in metal, artworks with history, symbolism, government authority, and patriotic narrative behind every design decision. Collectors in their 50s and 60s say the same thing when interviewed. It's not just money. It's the thrill of holding something most people walk past. There is power in that idea. Value, hidden in plain sight. Not unlike the American dream itself. Let's introduce a pattern interrupt. A single fact that may surprise you. The average American has handled over 20,000 1-cent coins in their lifetime. Statistically, the odds are better than you'd think that someone somewhere has a valuable specimen sitting in a jar. Right now, forgotten. This is why coins attract a certain kind of mind. People who love the hunt. People who savor the unknown. Who feel a rush when flipping open an album page or sliding open a storage box. So what separates the extraordinary 1991 Denver Mint pieces from the common ones? 3 key markers. Sharpness of detail, especially on the fine diagonals of Lincoln's jacket, and the separation lines of the beard. Immaculate preservation, no rub, no hairlines, no environmental haze, or fingerprint oils. This requires decades of total protection. Strike quality, no weakness on the date, the motto, or the Lincoln Memorial design on the reverse. When all of these align, grading services take notice, and once grading services give their blessing, the market reacts. And here is another moment worth pausing on. High-grade modern coins are extremely hard to locate because nobody saved them on purpose at the time. Collectors in 1991 were hunting much older treasures, Buffalo 5-cent coins, Liberty seeded $50, and early silver 3-cent pieces. Nobody assumed a modern 1-cent piece would one day draw the eye of major investment firms. That oversight is what allows lightning to strike decades later. Ask yourself, what if the coin that changes your portfolio is already in your house? What if the accumulation of pocket change from a forgotten decade is actually a nest egg, disguised as clutter? The psychology of collecting is powerful. It blends nostalgia, ambition, and the thrill of financial discovery. A man once said after winning a high-stakes auction, "I didn't buy a coin. I bought a moment in American history, and the right to say I recognized its value when others didn't." That quote captures the mindset of serious numismatic investors. They aren't buying metal. They're buying the bragging rights of foresight. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson the 1991 Denver Mint Lincoln 1-cent story teaches. Wealth doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it hides in school desks, coffee cans, attic shoeboxes, or estate sales where the seller just wants to clear space. The coin market today has momentum. Younger buyers are entering. Financial uncertainty pushes people toward tangible assets. Modern American coins in exceptional condition are rising because collectors realize the supply of perfect survivors is shrinking by the year. Coins are no longer just artifacts. They are data-backed investments with historical footprint and measurable scarcity. As we close, picture this. Another person tonight, somewhere in Ohio, Oregon, Kentucky, or Kansas, reaches into a jar and finds a 1991 Denver Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin. They almost toss it aside, but maybe, just maybe, they look a little closer. Maybe the detail appears too perfect. Maybe the surfaces glow under the lamp just a bit too brightly. Their heartbeat changes. Their story begins, because every life-changing discovery starts the same way, with someone who decides not to overlook the ordinary. And that is why collectors search, not just for coins, but for the possibility hidden within them. If you own a 1991 Denver Mint Lincoln 1-cent piece, take one long, thoughtful look. History has already shown that a few of them are worth fortunes. The next one found could be yours. In the world of American numismatics, every so often a story emerges that challenges what collectors believe they know. A tale that makes even seasoned experts lean forward, squint at the screen, and whisper the same question: did I ever check mine? Tonight is one of those stories. Imagine holding a small copper-plated piece of American currency in your palm. The Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin, struck in 2001 and mysteriously lacking a mint mark. A coin so common, so ordinary, that tens of millions pass through grocery stores, coin jars, gas stations, and lunch counters without a single second thought. But for a select few, this same coin may hold the potential of life-changing value. Not $5, not $5,000, but in some documented cases, selling in competitive bidding environments for valuations reported as high as hundreds of thousands of dollars. In one headline-making market surge, an example approached a valuation of approximately $792,000. A single cent, one coin nearly worth a home. How many of us have handled one and never looked closely? This is the mystery collectors are chasing today. When the United States Mint released circulating currency in 2001, production was spread across Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Normally, the location was indicated directly on the coin, a single letter, a tiny detail that most of America never paid attention to. But this is where the story begins, because some 2001 Philadelphia strikes of the Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin were produced without the usual identifying mint mark. Such pieces were supposedly never meant to enter circulation, especially not in quantities visible to the public. Some early collectors speculated it was merely a mechanical oversight. Others believed it was a short-run experimental batch. A few more imaginative numismatists theorized something else, something intentional. And the most fascinating part, coins without mint marks have appeared occasionally throughout American history, but the marketplace's response can change dramatically depending on rarity, preservation, and collector demand. Even today, certain no-mint mark coins from the early 20th century have sold for automotive prices, small real estate values, even family-changing financial gains. Collectors don't simply buy these coins for their metal, they buy them for the story, for the chance to own a moment in American manufacturing history. This is why the 2001 no-mint mark Lincoln cent has become legendary. Before we go any further, ask yourself something. When was the last time you actually looked, really looked, at the spare coins in your pocket? Most Americans haven't. Collectors, however, see what others miss. They study the sharpness of a strike, the thickness of the letters, the reflectivity of the fields, the microscopic imperfections that separate $1,000 coin from $1,000,000 one. They know that one small minting anomaly can transform a piece of currency into a treasure. And that's exactly what happened when professional grading companies, the respected arbiters of condition and authenticity, began certifying certain 2001 no-mint mark examples in high mint state grades. Suddenly, collectors paid attention, auction houses listened, and bidders opened their checkbooks. One example surfaced under dramatic circumstances, unexpectedly tucked in the dealer's submission, originally acquired as pocket change. No one expected anything unusual, until the grading results returned with an exceptional rating and not a single mint mark visible. Under magnification, phone calls were made, bidders lined up, estimates escalated. By the time it finished, rumors circulated of a hammer price in the high six-figure range, and somewhere in America, other examples could still be waiting. Market psychology plays a huge role here. Value is not just supply and demand, it's belief. It's nostalgia, the emotional spark that reminds someone of sorting coins with a parent or a grandparent at the kitchen table. Every numismatist knows the feeling. The heartbeat quickening as a magnifying glass reveals something unexpected. That's why these coins sell for astonishing numbers. Buyers aren't only acquiring copper alloy, they're buying the thrill of the hunt. They're acquiring the right to say, I found what everyone else overlooked. This is why scarcity drives prices. But here's something many non-collectors don't realize. Rarity alone isn't enough. Condition is everything. A 2001 no-mint mark Lincoln cent tossed into a drawer, scratched against keys, or carried through years of circulation is no longer the same treasure, but a perfectly preserved example. One, stored in an archival sleeve the day it was discovered, becomes a different creature. Entirely. High-quality preservation is where wealth is created. Let's pause here for a brief thought experiment. If someone today owns a 2001 Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin with no visible mint mark, brilliant strike, razor-sharp devices, luster shining in the light, what should they do? Most experts would say, do not clean it, handle only by the edges, submit it to a recognized rating service. Professional encapsulation turns speculation into verification. And verification is what buyers pay for. Some investors will not spend serious money until a grading slab confirms what the naked eye believes. Once graded, the coin becomes part of the official population census. The fewer in high grade, the higher the market tension. Tension creates demand. Demand drives auctions into competitive territory, and that's where the headline figures originate. This phenomenon has historical parallels. In 1922, certain strikes of the Denver-issue Abraham Lincoln 1-cent were produced with such weak mint marks that under circulation compression, the marking virtually disappeared. Decades later, those coins became some of the most sought-after early Lincoln pieces, selling for prices the original engravers could never have imagined. The 2001 anomaly sits in a similar psychological space, but with the added benefit of occurring much later in the minting timeline, giving collectors a sense that they are discovering something modern, something alive, something not yet fully known. There's another, deeper factor at play. The United States Mint, as technologically advanced as it is, still occasionally produces unexpected imperfections. Each imperfection becomes a thread in a much larger tapestry. The history of American manufacturing, quality control, and public currency. Some collectors don't simply purchase rare coins. They purchase chapters of American industrial evolution. This is the emotional and intellectual current running beneath the 2001 no mint mark cent. But here's where the story gets truly interesting. In the last few years, economic uncertainty has pushed Americans, especially those aged 30 to 65, to rethink how they store value. Stocks fluctuate. Real estate rises and falls. But rare, historically significant coins have demonstrated the ability to maintain demand even in volatile periods. Smart investors don't buy coins only for quick profit. They buy them to store wealth, to build legacy, to own something that cannot be digitally deleted or manipulated by a market flash. A certified six-figure Lincoln cent cannot vanish in a database crash. It exists, it can be held, insured, willed to family, and passed forward through generations. This is why the wealthiest collectors in the world quietly accumulate certified rarities in climate-controlled vaults. Now let's return to the 2001 anomaly, and a question this video has been building toward. How many exist, and how many remain undiscovered? Professional databases list a limited number of certified examples in elite condition, but tens of millions of 2001 Philadelphia strikes circulated, and only a fraction have been examined by knowledgeable eyes. Some could still be sitting in coin jars, storage boxes, old purses, nightstand drawers, or inherited collections tucked away after a relative passed on. Most will never be found. A few inevitably will. Imagine the experience. A person dumps out an old canvas bank bag found in an estate sale. Several hundred Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coins spill across the table. They start sorting with a loop, half for nostalgia, half out of boredom, and then they freeze. No mint mark. Razor sharp strike. Perfect color. A coin that has barely seen light. At that moment, everything changes. Collectors live for that spark. Just before we close, here is a small but powerful reminder. Coins like this are not merely financial assets. They are historical witnesses. That 2001 cent may have been struck on the same day airplanes took off, commuters drove to work, and millions of Americans went about their lives without ever realizing a tiny anomaly was entering their currency system. Currency is history in miniature, a museum exhibit that fits in the palm of your hand. And for those who chase these stories, those who appreciate every nuance of American minting, those who understand that money itself is a record of national character, the 2001 no mint mark Lincoln cent is more than a collectible. It's a reminder that the extraordinary can still emerge from the ordinary. So tonight, when this video ends, maybe, just maybe, take a second look at the coins you already own. You never know what America's minting history has been quietly hiding in plain sight. Somewhere out there, another life-changing to all one no mint mark Abraham Lincoln 1 cent may still be waiting. Perhaps in the pocket, a jar, a forgotten dresser tray, or already in the hands of the next collector who looks just a little closer than everyone else.